Hello and welcome to Classics Confidential. I'm Anastasia and Sonya is joining me again for the third time on Classics Confidential. So welcome, Sonya.
Hello, nice to be here.
On this occasion, Sonya is joining us to talk about Panoply, a website she runs with her husband Steve, where they animate ancient vases. And for War a Spectacle, Sonya has chosen a very exciting vase. So Sonya, would you like to tell us a bit more about what's on this vase?
Sure, thanks. Yes, it's a really lovely piece. It's from about 550. It's from the island of Euboea. It's a circular dish and it's the bottom of it that's been decorated, and you see scenes from a gym. So you have runners training and trainers watching them, but then you also have 1/3 of the vase taken up with fighters, a fight scene where three men are fighting each other, and in fact you also have spectators watching them, which I don't think we should think about as being a realistic representation of a fight, but perhaps is a nice way of bringing home that idea of just how important being seen was in terms of fighting. So you have this quite frequently on vases, this idea of being witnesses to fights. And I think there's a really nice linkage between having this fight in the gymnasium, because you get that sense partly of partly why people might exercise and train. You know, there's a practical purpose to it, which is to be spectacular on the battlefield.
And of course it was an integral part of masculine self-identity in antiquity, you know, to be a good fighter.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you have this sense of the excellence of the individual as a fighter, and their excellence within a gymnasium context already points towards that idea of it. And so I think, yes, people would have been extremely conscious from watching each other and spending time amongst each other of who was good at things, who looked really good, who was able to perform really well.
And of course, war was an integral part of the ancient polis. It involved pretty much the whole of society, and you indicate that in your animation. Can you tell us how?
Sure, absolutely. We wanted to give a sense that the main fighter within the animation, that he had a backdrop to him, a social backdrop. So that's why we started him out in the gymnasium. You see him interacting with a coach who is not in great physical shape, but is exactly as he appears on the vase, and is shown there interacting with him. Yeah, so we thought that would show his life within the city before we saw that idea of his life outside the city, because that would have been people's experience. People would have been living most of their lives knowing that they would be fighting at some point, knowing that their relatives would be fighting, but they wouldn't necessarily be doing it all the time themselves. It's the backdrop to their other activities. Then, once the fighter is actually ready to go, then we see more interactions. So you have a handshaking scene as he prepares to depart, and this is quite a common scene on vases. This was obviously quite important for people and how they thought about war and what that meant, and the departure of the individual setting off. But they're not just on their own, you know, you see them within their family. So in this case, we see him depart from the individual who he's been training with, who on the vase is the onlooker to his fight.
It's also usual to have women in these leave-taking scenes, and as you told me, you thought about including one in this animation but decided against it. Could you tell us why?
Absolutely. Yes, it would have been really nice to include that. As you say, it's quite common that you might see perhaps an older man shaking hands and saying goodbye, but also a woman perhaps representing a wife, maybe representing a mother, maybe both. Sometimes holding maybe a bowl as part of a religious ritual for saying goodbye. And I think these scenes give that really powerful sense of the separation of the individual, leaving one social context to go to another, but also of their involvement in it. That family unit, they have been involved in the preparation of that individual, the inspiration of that individual, maybe even in a more literal sense, in the production of their armour. You know, his mother might have helped to make his linen armour, or his father might have said, you know, here is my helmet. So there are lots of very involved senses there, and it would have been nice to have that idea of the female's perspective on warfare, which those scenes provide very nicely. But we have a policy when we're creating the animations that we try and stick closely to the scenes that are on the vase, and there are no women on that vase where you have the gymnasium and the fight. You know, that's not a very female inclusive environment, so it's not surprising there are no women on that vase. And we just didn't feel particularly comfortable creating a new one just for the occasion. What I would suggest in that context is, if you're interested in that, you can see other vases that have them in. We also have another animation called Well Wishers, where again you see a young man shaking hands goodbye, and in the background you have that classic combination of the other individual man and the woman watching this activity going on as well.
Talking about religious aspects, there's also a scene of a sacrifice in the animation. Tell us why you included that and what it adds to our understanding of how ancient religion functioned within warfare.
Sure. I think it's worth considering religious activity within the ancient world as something that informs so much of what people do. In fact, all sorts of activities are combined with religious rituals for warfare, where you're in so much danger, where what you're doing matters so much, where you are on show before the gods, that there would be religious activities involved as part of that. So in fact, religious activities go right the way through warfare. So the scene that we have in the animation, the sacrifice has just taken place, and the departing soldier is examining a liver, which is one of the key ways that you can see, has any divinity sent you a sign, so you can see if it's a very healthy looking liver, this is all very promising. If this is a very troubling, ill looking liver, that is a very bad sign, and you might think of doing the sacrifice again, or perhaps of leaving whilst feeling very anxious. So a really profound way of interacting with the divine, but also of seeking guidance, seeking comfort. When we see it at the start, this is quite a personal thing, someone doing it for themselves. By the time someone is on campaign, their general, if you're Spartan, your king, is taking on that role and being a religious leader, if you like, for that big group. And in those situations, I think that the troops probably got a great deal of encouragement from being able to see their leader going through this process, doing the right thing. So in a sense, it was as important for that to be seen and acknowledged as it was to do it.
Yes. So it's another form of communal display.
Absolutely, absolutely. People wanted to see their leader perform the rituals, just as they wanted to see that dedications were made afterwards. They wanted to, absolutely have that display of correct behaviour, if you like, a display of the request for favour. I mean, who wouldn't be encouraged by that in the right context?
Talking of display, of course, another thing on display would have been the armour, the weapons that the Hoplites wore. So tell us, how did you deal with this aspect of the vase?
Yes, great question. The original vase has this wonderful variety amongst the fighters. So you have the 3 fighters, and yet they're all wearing different equipment. You have one individual has a metal breastplate, and you can see that it's got marked out, a sort of very stylised chest piece. And you can see another one, for example, just has a cloth tunic on. So quite different. And they each individually have different helmets, completely different styles. And, that doesn't happen by accident. The vase maker made a very particular choice to do them that way, and so we wanted to reflect that in the animation. In the period in which the vase was made, in the archaic period, and throughout the classical period, people brought their own equipment to battles. This is not state-issued identical kit. So absolutely, there is tremendous opportunity for personal choice and for display, absolutely, whether people want to pick metal armour that has a magnificent shine to it and just looks fabulous, or whether somebody might go for something is linen, so perhaps doesn't have that spectacular metal look to it, but might look very nice painted up. The helmet, do you go with the one that works and you've had a long time, or do you want to try something else? There is tremendous options about how you decorate the front of your shield. So enormous potential for the display of personal preference, but also the display of wealth. So lots of room for innovation, of course, as well in doing that. So I think that, yes, people again would have been very interested to see each other and see how people looked. But if you are approaching your enemy, then of course there is also the idea that a spectacularly equipped force is much more intimidating. If you see those people coming towards you and they look professional, they look amazing, they look in great shape, so much more terrifying than a rabble coming towards you. So I think that idea is profoundly linked within Greek warfare, of that idea of look. And the generals and the kings knew it too as well. You sometimes hear of prizes for whose equipment is looking amazing. Even amongst the cavalry, you can get prizes for whose horse equipment is looking amazing. So there's obviously, real interest in the look of things as well as the sort of functional excellence of things. So we have this idea of variety. We tried to reflect that in the figures. We needed more than 3, so we took these different figures, and then when we needed to replicate and create new figures, we mixed and matched their equipment. And so we might take one breastplate, and here it is again on this person, but we give them a slightly different arm piece, or here is this figure and we slightly change the colour on that. So it's the same equipment as the 3, but again, lots of variety within that.
Because you wanted to give the suggestion also that this is an army going into battle, not just 3 individuals going into battle.
Yeah, absolutely. With most of the battle scene, we've tried to reflect a more sort of fluid battle line, separation between people. That's the sort of battle we envisioned. But we also had a scene where lots of feet come into the battle. We wanted that sort of the uniformity of the feet moving, just because we felt this would be very threatening, and you'd have the idea of the fear before a battle, that fear that so many people are coming for you, and that perhaps also solidarity of a lot of you going out together. So in a way, yes, it exaggerated that sense of uniformity to create an intimidating sense of weight. So yes, I think appropriately there is quite a mixture of individuality and sameness within the whole thing.
Well, thank you, Sonya. If you'd like to learn more about the work that Sonya has done animating ancient vases, and in particular as this relates to ancient warfare, then take a look at her chapter in War a Spectacle.